All right. There you are. Hope she didn't run away. Yeah, she left. A couple months ago, Launa Grunau, who's been on staff literally since the very beginning, during even in our launch team time, Launa and Jeff have been part of our what we call our lead team. She leads our creative arts and so much more. It's like when you're in a young church, you wear lots of hats. So one minute you might be this, the next you might be that. That's just kind of the way it rolls in a church like this, and including myself too. And so a few months back, Launa stepped up and spoke on a Sunday morning, and it was absolutely brilliant. She did such a wonderful, wonderful job. And it's that realization of, man, we have such gifted people in the church, and how silly it would be of me to never get her up here more often to be able to impart the word of God into his people here. And so about a month ago, I said, interested on the last Sunday of the month? And
you gave me like 2 weeks.
Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Maybe. Okay, I thought of the idea a month ago. I thought of the idea a month ago, and then I brought it up to her a week ago. Yeah. Shows how great she is, how flexible she is. So anyway, she has the word for us today. She's going to wrap up the Break the Mold series, and she did a wonderful job in first service. Don't want to jinx you, but it was awesome. So anyway, saying that, put your hands together for the wonderful Launa Grunau.
Good morning. I am so grateful to be up here again today to share my heart about how God has called us to live in light of this Breaking the Mold series. So let's pray before we get started. Lord, I ask that you would open our eyes and our ears and our hearts today to hear what you would have to say. Lord, if there's a place where we need conviction, Lord, I pray that you would bring it. Lord, if you need to bring us encouragement today, I pray that you would bring that too. Pray that as we begin to dive into your word and to discover who you are and how you've called us to live, that we would be open and willing and ready to do what you would have for us. Pray that you would speak through me today. In your name, amen. Good morning. So as we're going through this Break the Mold series, we've been talking about how do we, all the boxes that we've put God in, we've tried to fit him into the molds that we have in our minds about him. And one of the things that as we've been doing that, God really spoke to me was about, whether they're right or they're wrong, whatever our perception of God is, we will build our life accordingly. And so one of the things I want to ask us today is, how have my misconceptions of God caused me to misunderstand how he has called me to live? If we've misunderstood him as a God who wants us to accomplish things and do and work for him, then we're going to build our lives accordingly. And if we see him as a God who is punishing, then we will build our lives according to that as well. But really, God wants us to have an abundant life. He wants to break the mold of running the rat race, the mold that we've created in our lives, so that we can have fulfilling and abundant life that he's called us to. Often life is like a roller coaster, especially if you are following God. It might look something like this. Anyone ever felt like that? God asked you to do something and you're like, no. But you know that that's what he's called you to do, and so going with it is so much more fun. And how much more can we enjoy the roller coaster? We can enjoy that ride the more we have and let the Holy Spirit fill us with who he has called us to be. So this past weekend, we celebrated some birthdays in my family. We celebrated my husband Jeff's and my dad's. My dad is here today. Happy birthday, Dad. Today is his birthday. So usually I make birthday cakes. Like, that's my thing. I do that for almost everybody in our family. But this time we decided to have pie. So Dad got banana cream and Jeff got key lime. Who here loves pie? See, I don't know anybody who doesn't love pie. So what are your favorite pies? Banana cream, coconut, lemon meringue, pumpkin. My grandpa's favorite was strawberry rhubarb. I love that. Boston cream pie. That's usually the pie cake that he gets for his birthday. I happen to love chicken pot pie. That might actually be my favorite of all of the pies. But Jason last week talked about, and he quoted C.S. Lewis and talking about how often as Christians we settle for mud pies when he wants to offer us lemon meringue. And how let me just tell you, I am preaching to myself today because I am the chief of all sinners when it comes to settling for a life that is less than what God has called me to. And I think a lot of it has to do with what our culture around us says that we should be doing, how we should live our lives. So I'm going to give you a little sentence here. I want to see if you can pick out some of the popular slogans that you might have heard before. We're often told to live a life that is full of get more, just do it, be all that you can be, your way, right away, open happiness because you're worth it. Get more, who does that come from? Anyone know? T-Mobile. Get more, T-Mobile. There it is. Just do it. Be all that you can be. Your way, right away. At Burger King, now, extra points if you can sing it. Open happiness. Coke. Because you're worth it. Ladies? L'Oreal. L'Oreal, because you're worth it. We live in this instant gratification society where we're called to live in the moment, say yes, just do it. But what's the fallout when we say yes to everything? Our culture values being overscheduled. Do you run your life, or does your life run you? How many of you have a phone that tells you when you have to pick up your children from school? How many of you would not remember to do half the things in your life if your phone didn't tell you to do these things? We live a life at such a fast pace. We fill our life in all four corners to the brim that we often cannot keep up with it, and it runs us ragged. I am, again, do not live by my example in this. This is something that I have struggled with for a really long time. I remember in high school, I was running track, I was in a play, I was doing all the honor, anything and everything that I could be doing, I was doing. My senior year in college, I ended up I had 50 units in my last year of college. 50. I did. I had 50, and 2 of those courses required a total of 300 hours of community service. I was working part-time, I was married, and I was the president of the American Sign Language Club on campus at State. My life looked a little bit like this. It was very full and really hard to get clarity about what I was doing. So after I graduated, I had chased all the dreams and earned all the stuff, and I slept for 3 months straight. I had burned myself out to the point where I had lost my peace. That was what I traded to finish college and get through it. Even that fall, after I started working, I would go to work and I would come home and I would take like a 2-hour nap every day, and then I would still go to bed at night. And how often do we, in the pursuit of all of the things, are we willing to sacrifice and trade our peace and our joy? It's really common in our culture not to leave space for rest, which is really unwise. And if your body crashes after a season of time, you probably haven't been taking rest along the way. There's a study from ustravel.org that said a total of 768 million days of paid time off went unused in 2018. Of those, 236 million were completely forfeited. Those were use it or lose it hours, and people did not take their vacation time. That is a cultural problem that we have. And I think one of the interesting things, as the Roger Dow, he's the CEO and president of U.S. Travel Association, he said, when I see how many vacation days went unused, I don't just see a number. I see 768 million missed opportunities to recharge, to experience something new, and to connect with family and friends. So why do we do this? Why do we schedule ourselves? Why do we work till we're dead and never rest? I think because we bought into the lie that time is money. We want to squeeze every last drop out of it. So what happens when we don't take time to rest and guard our time well? We end up being overcommitted to things, and then we have to back out because we really can't do it, and then we feel guilty that we've disappointed the people in our lives, but we keep doing it over and over again. And then maybe we actually do it. We know that we shouldn't, but we do it anyway. And so then we drop the ball. We're sleep deprived, we're depressed, and we're often resentful of where we owe our time. But this is not what God has called us to do. His plan is to give us life abundantly. John 10:10 says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life and have it to the full, to have it abundantly." Are you living your life abundantly? Or do you feel like you're on a stationary bike, that you are just going through the motions round and round and round, and you're not getting anywhere? If you're not living abundantly, you are doing it wrong. God has called us to have life in abundance. I've heard it said that if Satan can't make you bad, he'll make you busy. Ooh, right? Like, we may not be outright sinning, but if we're so busy that we can't hear the voice of God, Satan will completely settle for that. He will steal our time 1 minute, 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week at a time, until at the end of our lives we find that we have lived shallowly. We have to be careful not to confuse activity with achievement, especially when the kids were really little. Jeff would come home, he's like, "So what'd you do today?" And I was like, "I don't know. I don't think I did anything today, but I was really busy while I did it." And I have to go back and remember, but sometimes the things of real value are not going to be on a checkoff sheet. Maybe it's playing dress up. Maybe it's playing with the Play-Doh. Maybe it's sitting with a coffee and going over to a friend's house and hanging out with them because they need the company. But oftentimes I think what really happens is that we waste our time. Any time wasters in here? I am a big time waster. I totally can do that. But when we fulfill his calling in our life, we can live abundantly. So I want you guys to take out your little worksheets. I brought you some homework today. So everybody in their lives, rich, poor, young, old, I don't care who you are, everyone has 168 hours in their week. What I want you to do is at the top, I want you to write down and guess how many free or flexible hours do you have during your week. When I did this, I was shocked at how much time I actually have in my life. I'm a busy mom of 4. We've got appointments up the wazoo. We are all over the place. I had 37 free hours in my week. If someone had asked me how much free time I had, 37 would not have been my answer. So what am I doing with my 37 hours? At the end of the week, where is it going? And I think it's very much like when we guess how much money we have in the bank before we write that check. Often we'll write that check and say, yes, we're going to do this, before we even realize that maybe somebody else in the family has already spent that same money or that time. There's always going to be an opportunity cost. When your schedule is really full, you're going to have to give up something to say yes to something else. And sometimes it's hard because it's not like giving up a bad thing for a good thing. Usually that's an easy decision. What do you have when you have a good thing and a good thing that you have to choose between? I know I'm inclined to say yes to both, and I'll just figure out how to make it happen. But often that leaves me feeling overwhelmed. So first I want you to estimate your free time. And don't forget, as you're crossing things off, you're going to cross things off like your sleep time, things that you know you already have committed for in the week. Maybe it's the hours you're at work, the hours you are, maybe you have a scheduled workout time or Bible study, whatever it is, block out whatever you know you already have committed. Don't forget to include the other people in your life who speak commitments into your life. So sometimes that happens. But I think one of the things that we'll notice is as we find this margin, as we find all those white spaces in our lives, we're going to find that we are maybe filling them with things that are really nothing but distractions. Any binge watchers in here? Just me? Binge watching, love it, right? You give me some Netflix and some baking shows, or I have a child in my house who will geek out on Dude Perfect. Any Dude Perfect fans here? Got a couple people. There's sports guys who do amazing like throws and catches, and he loves it. It's awesome. But how many times in our lives do we fill all of the space and all of the margin with just distractions that really don't have any value? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't rest and just take a break and enjoy life. I'm not saying that at all. But so often those things can bleed into our time. Maybe it's checking Instagram or Facebook. You want a real accurate picture of how much time you waste there? Go check the usage on your phone. You might be surprised on your activity how much time you spend on these apps. Maybe it's games, whatever it is. I was not real happy when I went and looked at the activity log on my phone. I was like, well, that would be those 10 extra hours that I didn't know where they went this week. So I had to start setting limits. I had to set up so that my phone does not send me any notifications before 9 a.m. in the morning, because I need to be getting my kids ready for the day and getting them going. I had to have it shut off at a certain time at night because I will lie awake and let my brain just do this, without really getting, and then I'm tired. Well, then it's just this cycle of over and over again. The other thing that sometimes I think happens is that even when we're in the moment, our mind is some other place. Our mind is thinking about the things we have to do tomorrow, and so we've missed out on this time that we have because we're too busy planning ahead, or maybe we're dreaming of worst case scenarios, or whatever it is that we do in our brains, but it is robbing us of our time. My last tip, leave your phone at home. Does it make anyone start to panic just a little bit? And it's true for me, I know, I can't, oh my gosh, well, what if Jeff needs to call me? What if this kid needs this? But the times that I have accidentally left my phone at home, I was so much more present in whatever it was that I was doing because I was not constantly getting a buzz in my pocket or people interrupting me or calling for my time. I could really focus on what I was doing in that moment. If I'm going for a walk, I don't really have to track my steps. I don't have to have music. I could just go for a walk. Have some peace, have some downtime in our days with that. So whether after you do your schedule you find that you are time rich or time poor, we are all going to have things vying for our time, vying for our attention. But the first thing is we have to have an accurate picture of where we are. Otherwise, we'll say yes without really being able to, or saying no when we really could say yes. And really, we have to look at more than just time when we're evaluating our schedules. This activity came from the Best Yes Bible study that I'm leading for the women's group. And in the book, Lisa Turkhurst recommends when we're presented with an opportunity or we're asked of our time, that we put it through a 4-part filter to determine whether or not we have the capacity to do it. And I think most of us are pretty good at getting 2 of those. So the 4 things are: physically, can I do this? Can I be there in that physical location at that time to do this thing? Financially, can I afford to do that? Most of us are pretty good about knowing, yeah, I can't afford to do that, or yes, we can. But what about, do we ever look at that through the lens of spirituality? Do I ever take into consideration the spiritual cost of this activity? If I say yes to this sports season, but I know that it means that I'm going to miss church for 3 months, is that an acceptable trade-off if I'm taking time away from my spiritual development? Or emotional. I could say yes to all of the other 3, but if I can't emotionally make that decision and come out on the other side of it and still be a happy, nice mom, maybe I shouldn't make that choice. We have to decide what it's going to cost us and can we afford it? Are these decisions, is this thing that you're being asked to do, is it going to rob you of your love, your joy, your peace, your patience, your kindness? If it's going to, then the answer is going to be no, even if it's a really good thing. We had some friends of ours last year that we were giving their daughter a ride a couple of days a week from school to her after school program because they were both working. And it worked out great. We did it, but then they asked us again this year and they asked us, could you do all 5 days in the week? And I was like, I love you guys and I want to say yes to this, but as we looked at it, we looked first for, can we physically be there? I couldn't physically be there every day, but I could do a couple, I was like, well, I could make these couple of days work. I think we could make that happen. Financially, yeah, I can pay for the gas, I can drive across town, and I can do that whole thing. It's not impeding me going to church or Bible study, so I feel like it's not conflicting with Jesus. It's actually probably very in line with what Jesus would ask me to do in serving my friends. But emotionally, could I deal with being at another place at another time, 1 more day of the week? And the answer was no, except for Monday. I was like, Monday, I could do that. The other days of the week, I just can't do that. And so I said, hey, this is all I can do this year. Is that helpful? I said, yeah, we'll make the other days work. So I was like, great, sounds good. So we started doing it, and then they said, you know what? We went ahead and found an after-school program that provides transportation. You know how good it felt to be able to allow them, that they weren't even having to fix the schedule and who's picking her up on which day. For them, that was a much better answer. However, if I had said, yes, I'll do all 5 days, I would have robbed my family of all of those things, and it would have prevented God from providing a different answer for them. So if you look at your schedule and you find that you are time poor, you have no margin, no white space in your life, I would suggest that we make some cuts. John 15:2 says, he cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. And while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so it'll be even more fruitful. So if you feel like your life has not been bearing the fruit that all your efforts should be producing, start pruning. For my birthday this year, Jeff got me a lime tree, and I was so excited. And I went to Costco, and I picked it out, and I picked the one that had the most limes on it, so potentially I could have a decent crop this year. My birthday's in April. I picked my first 2 limes this week, and I'm so excited. But when I first got my tree, I looked at it, I was like, I've got all these limes, so that's awesome. And then I realized all 8 of them were like on one branch. And I was like, if I leave all 8 of them there, I'm gonna get 8 limes about that big, and I'm not gonna get any use out of them. I had to, as hard as it was, prune about half of those off. I had to take half of those out so that they could fully develop, they could fully mature, so that I could get the benefit of having a lime tree. And there's always going to be seasons in our life where we have more time and less time, so it might require more cuts or less cuts, depending on where you are. Yearly for us, springtime is busier, and so I know that if I'm going to add something to my schedule in the spring, I'm going to have to cut some other things out. There's also seasons of life that are going to be different for everyone. Maybe you're coming up on retirement. Maybe there's a job change. Maybe you're caring for a new family member that you weren't caring for before. Maybe you just had a baby. That is definitely going to change how much time you have available for all of the other things that you want to do. Maybe you have kids entering school. Maybe you're going back to school. Maybe you have an empty nest coming up. Whatever season of life you find yourself in, take the white space from your schedule and start dreaming with it. What are the things that you've always wanted to do? What are those God-given dreams that he's given you that you want to pursue? Maybe you've always wanted to go on a missions trip, write a book, go back to school, run a marathon. Maybe it's just walking a mile. Maybe your doctor has been telling you to do something for your health, but you just haven't been able to fit it in the schedule. Or maybe you've just been avoiding it. We're good at that, aren't we? We'll fill our time with other things so we don't have to do the things that we know we should be doing. So what is that thing that you've always said, oh, I would do this, but. Oh, if I had the time, I would, but. Get your big butt out of the way and start doing what God has called you to do. And then look at those white spaces and start filling those in. Designate time for those things that you really want to do. Put them in your schedule. Block them off. Because if you don't, you will give them away like that. And it's never too late. If you're looking over like, oh, you're young, honey. I don't feel so young anymore, but we're getting there. But there's lots of famous late bloomers in life. Soichiro Honda created the Honda Motor Company at age 42. Julia Child was 49 when she published her first cookbook. Colonel Sanders was 65 when he started KFC. Grandma Moses was a famous American folk artist. At the age of 76, she developed arthritis and could no longer do needlepoint, so she switched to painting. She had a 25-year painting career. And in 2006, one of her paintings sold for $1.2 million. The biblical Moses was 80 when God called him to lead the Israelite slaves out of Egypt. It is never too late to pursue the dreams that God has given you. We got to know our limits, though. The Best Yes study, which is what I'm leading, this is where I got the sermon notes and for the little thing you have here with your calendar. I like to consider it the Dave Ramseying of your calendar. Does anybody ever take a Dave Ramsey class? Right? Every penny has to have a designated location, otherwise you'll spend more than you have. It's easy to feel like that calendar can be really restricting, like a budget feels really restricting. Like I'm not a huge budget. I mean, I like the budget because I like what it does. I am not great about like the budgeting of the calendar because it feels really constricting. Like, but you told this is on there. That means I can't say yes to this other thing that I really want to do, and that's very hard for me. And it's hard for a lot of us. But if we don't decide who gets our time, we are going to be at the mercy of others. We are going to be in time debt. Proverbs 22b says, the borrower is slave to the lender. And while it's true of money, I think it's also true of our time. Lending out all of our time to other people in our lives is going to leave us stressed, cranky, resentful, and then we're not able to live in the love and the joy and the peace that God has called us to live in. So why do we do this? In Lisa's book, she says it's the disease to please. Because we want to say yes to people, right? Like we want people to like us. We want to be able to do all of these great things. We have to remember that not every assignment is ours. Just like the assignment with taking my friend's daughter to school, I couldn't let that be my assignment. And oftentimes we prevent God from providing in ways that he really would want to provide for people. I think the other reason we do this is we have the FOMO. Who has FOMO? FOMO is the fear of missing out. I have a bad case of the FOMO. Super bad. I don't want to miss out on time with my friends. I don't want to miss out on this next great opportunity. But what if by saying yes to all of those things, what I'm really missing out on is the very best thing that God would have for me? A good no can lead to a best yes. But to find our best yes, we have to take time to discern what that is. So how do we do that? Maybe you already know what those best yes things are. Maybe you know exactly what God has called and inspired you to do. Maybe you have too many things. Maybe you got to narrow it down by the end of the day. But the best way to discern what it is, if we have too many to choose from, or what it is if we have no idea what it should be, is to quiet ourselves before him. We have to prioritize spending time with him. And not just in, yes, do your Bible study, yes, meet with your accountability partner, yes, be at church, do all of those things. A lot of times we substitute that as spending time with the Lord without actually sitting and listening and being quiet before him. This summer we started reading a book as a staff. It's called Strengthening the Leadership of Your Soul by Ruth Haley Barton. And in this book, she highlights the story of Moses and how he used solitude to strengthen his leadership. And it's very true as ministry leaders that we can get real busy creating all of the ministry opportunities and the things that people can spend time with the Lord and enjoy him and enjoy his presence. But often it's hard for us to enjoy time with him ourselves when we have busied ourselves with all of these things. So it became a great time as a staff to really get into this book and ask God to speak to us about what are the things in our personal lives and in our ministry here at the church, like what are the things that we really want to say yes to, and ask the Lord to speak to us about what those would be. And it became very obvious, at least for me, that a lot of times in my time with the Lord, I come to him with a long list of things that I would like him to do. Pray for this person, heal this person, could you bless this thing that I'm doing here, could you help me do, I just go through this whole list. And I have a child in my home who does this exact same thing to me every single day. He will ask me a question and I will respond with an answer. And while I'm answering him, he will tell me what he thinks the answer should be. Or he changes the subject and talks about something else. And I'm like, I'm trying to answer do you really want to know the answer? Or you just want to talk to me like this? And then I look at him and I go, you are just like your mother. I do that to God all the time. I sit there and I give him all these things and I ask all these questions, but yet I don't sit and say, God, what are you saying to me about these things? Proverbs 10:8 says, the wise are glad to be instructed, but babbling fools fall flat on their faces. How often that I lack wisdom here and I don't wait to be instructed and I act more like that babbling fool and I just keep running my mouth. But what could happen if we sat quietly? There's a lot of clarity when we let our lives have some downtime, when we create space where we can sit and listen to him, we can hear those answers that he wants to give to us. One of the great stories in the book the leadership book, was this story about Moses, and it was Exodus 3:4. When the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, he called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Every day there are burning bushes in our lives that God would want to call our attention to. But how many times are we just too busy running from one thing to the next to pay attention to what he's calling us to? How long has God been calling you to something? He's been setting that burning bush out there waiting for you to turn around and notice. Because God in this story, he doesn't call to Moses from the bush and say, hey, Moses, over here, look up here, look up here. You know, he doesn't do that. He waits for Moses to stop and turn around and look before he speaks to him. So often we might miss that because we have failed to watch. Or maybe we've been begging God for a sign, but we've been walking right past it. I love the story of Elijah in 1 Kings when he's on the mountain and the Lord comes and the Lord is not in the fire, he's not in the earthquake, he's not in the wind, he's in the quiet whisper. But how do we hear a whisper? We have to be quiet ourselves. And maybe the more important question is, maybe God has called you, but what has your answer been? Do you answer like Moses, here I am, right here? Or do we take off and run the other direction because it freaks us out that he might ask us to do something hard? Or he might ask us to give up something that we really love? So as the staff had been going through this, it was about a week into the book, and I'd been diligent in like sitting and doing the reading, but then also just sitting, listening, asking what God would have me do. And within about a week, I felt very clearly that the Lord was calling me to go back to seminary. Not back to, for the first time, going to seminary. And so this last Wednesday, I was accepted into the program at Fresno Pacific to go back and get my master's in community leadership and development. Yay, homework! I'm very excited about the homework thing. And there's gonna have to be a trade-off in my life to do that. I'm gonna have to give up some things. I'm gonna have the worst case of FOMO that I have ever had in my life to make this work. But this is my best yes. This is the thing that God has called me to that requires me to be diligent and obedient. Now, I will say results may vary. Do not expect that if in 1 week that God's going to call you to seminary, they're like, I am not doing my quiet time at all, because that does not sound great. And you may not hear a very clear word about anything, but it's that developing that muscle of sitting patiently before him. Be boringly consistent in doing that. Just do it every single day. And I will tell you, even, Jeff's been doing it too, and Jeff has not been called to lead anything else or change the direction of his life. But I can sure tell you the days that he has done his quiet time and the days that he hasn't, right about 2:30 is when I notice, have you had your quiet time today, love? Because just being in the presence of the Lord, it brings that peace in his life. And that he does the same thing for all of us. He wants to speak to us. He wants to give us that abundant life. But are we willing to listen? Are we willing to trade the mud pies for lemon meringue? Are we willing to let him break the mold of the life we thought we should have or what it was supposed to look like to give us the life that he wants for us? Are we willing to give up the life that culture has influenced us to desire? Are we willing to step out of that mundane stationary bike life and get on that roller coaster and go down that ride, that thrill ride of following the Lord wherever he would lead us? That's that thing that we have to ask ourselves today. As the worship team comes up, I want you to take your sermon note real quick, and I want you to do your Sunday. You can mark off right here. Like, what time is it? Almost noon. Awesome. You've already filled your day up. Halfway done. Go ahead and start marking those things off and do the rest of your day. Find the white space in your day. Know what your limits are. And when you've set those parameters, then you can start to dream. And when you start dreaming, be still. Ask the Lord to speak to you. Discern what he would have you do. And so we're going to start this practice right now in communion, because that's what that silence before him, that is communion. You're communing with God in those moments. So while we do communion today, take the time to ask the Lord what he would have you do. Ask him to inspire you and to give you dreams. So if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, if you've accepted him into your heart, the communion tables are open for you. We are going to, family style, just come on up, grab your elements, and go back to your seats. If you're not a believer, or if you're not really sure what that means yet, then that's okay, cool. Hang out where you are. If you have questions, we can answer those for you. But I really want us to take that time today to reflect on the sacrifice that he's done for us, but also to ask that in light of his sacrifice, what is he calling us to do? Thank you, Lord, for your word this morning. Thank you that you have been so faithful to keep calling us, to keep setting out those burning bushes, that you are still waiting for us to turn and notice and listen. I pray that you would speak very clearly to us about what you would have us do. And I also pray, Lord, for our soft hearts, that we would respond, here I am. If that's where you want to take me, Lord, I am willing to go, even though it scares me. I am willing to do that. I am willing to be obedient because I know that the life you offer, that abundant life, is way better than anything I could fabricate on my own. It's way better than any mold that I want to try to shove my life into.